wonderful to have you on Uncover Wealth Radio. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Annette. I'm glad to be here.
So, Kris, tell us, what is delusional altruism?
Yeah, so I have been advising ultra high net worth donors and philanthropists and, leaders of corporate giving programs for over 20 years and helping them to, effectively give their money away, which is harder than you might imagine. And one thing that I noticed over the past 2 decades is that funders are, they're genuine in their altruism. Donors, really want to make a difference. They want to change the world. They want to have an impact, but they're actually getting in their own way and they're preventing themselves from achieving the impact that they want. And so that's the delusion. They're altruistic, but delusional in their altruism because they're not crazy. They're just holding on to misguided beliefs and practices that aren't actually serving them well. And often they don't realize that's even happening. And so I felt this was, quite frankly, such a significant problem in philanthropy that I decided to write a book on it, which is Delusional Altruism: Why Philanthropists Fail to Achieve Change and What They Can Do to Transform Their Giving. And so in the book, I outline 7 different ways that delusional altruism manifests itself. And then the second half of the book is, what funders and donors can do differently to have more of a, a transformational impact on whatever issue or cause they care about, but often by changing themselves and how they give.
Nice. So what are those philanthropists? I nearly couldn't quite get all those letters out. What are those philanthropists doing wrong, for want of a better word?
And I'll start by just saying, philanthropist really describes most of us. So we often think of, the ultra wealthy, which is true. And, they're very philanthropic, but also it's, business owners like you and me.
Yeah.
Really anyone who is giving in either of their resources or their time, expertise, talent, their connections, to open doors for other people. So I just, thinking about your listeners, and I'm sure many of them would love to, be giving away millions of dollars,
of course,
or just earning millions of dollars. But, these really apply to all of us. And so one of them is having a scarcity mindset. And this surprises a lot of people because, you assume if somebody is giving money away, then you must have enough money that you have extra to give away. And so that implies an abundance mindset. But really, I think a lot of donors experience a scarcity mindset, which is this misguided belief that you really need to maintain a Spartan operation with your giving in order to deliver the most value in the communities that you're trying to serve. And so this manifests itself most often in, kind of being, quite frankly, stingy in the ways that we donors support nonprofit, non-governmental organizations. So, typically there's this belief that, if I'm going to give money away to a nonprofit, then 99 cents of every dollar needs to go and help the poor people or, do whatever that nonprofit is seeking to do. Yeah. And only 1 penny of the, 1 cent of the dollar, if you will, would go to, overhead or administration.
Yeah.
But to me, this is really misguided because, nonprofits play a really important role in whatever the issue is: ending homelessness, early childhood education, mental health support, substance abuse, we can go on and on. And as a donor, if you believe in this issue, it's an important issue to you, and you find a nonprofit that's doing great work and really making a difference, then wouldn't you want that nonprofit to have, top talent, a great board of directors, fabulous financial management systems, great fundraising apparatus, the ability to evaluate themselves and assess what's working, what's not working, good communication, all that stuff, right? Well, of course you would. But as donors, we just say, oh, the money can only go for the program. It can't go for the quote unquote overhead, but it's the overhead that covers all that stuff. Yeah. Just like we as business owners, we need to invest in our own strategy, our coaching, consulting, investment of our learning and technology, all this stuff. good financial management, all that, quite frankly, costs money, and certainly our own time. And so I think, too often the scarcity mindset applies, and it's really funders end up hamstringing these nonprofits, and they are kind of expected to hobble along really frugally, and it's really holding them back from having the impact that they really could be having. And so instead, I really think donors need to invest more fully in the true costs and the real costs of running a nonprofit effectively. I'm not talking about exorbitant salaries and sending people off to, Hawaii for board retreats. I'm just talking about good financial management. And so that's one way. And I think the other way is even applying that lens to the donor themselves. So I think the scarcity mindset applies when donors don't invest in themselves. And by that, I mean, it doesn't even have to be money. It can simply be your own learning, really understanding what the community's needs are and really unpacking that by disaggregating data by race and ethnicity to really understand what's happening, or learning about best practices and whatever issue you're focusing on, building relationships with grantees, or thinking about, how could I leverage, I might have X amount of dollars or, pounds to give away. How could I leverage that with others to create a bigger impact? So I think really that, and it could also be in your own coaching, your own advising, but really investing in yourself is really important. And too often donors don't do that because, again, there's often this feeling of guilt. I have this wealth and other people need it more than I do, so I should give it all away. And, that seems noble, right? But I think it's actually delusional, because in order to have the greatest impact as a donor, I think you need to become the best donor that you can be. And that means really equipping yourself, your foundation, or just, yourself, your family, your company, in the best ways to give.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I often speak about you can't serve as a business owner if your own cup is empty. And it's a similar concept to that, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very similar concept. Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead.
Oh no, on you go. It's amazing. I hadn't even thought of the kind of giving aspect of, basically doing a disservice to the nonprofits when we don't think about actually all the other costs that they have, and we don't focus on the fact that needs supported so that they can then support the cause as well at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think especially, this year, this pandemic has really shown us the importance of, all of us, business owners, nonprofits, for-profits, any organization, having both, I think it's the strongest businesses, the strongest nonprofits that were heading into this crisis that are able to sustain themselves and thrive and ideally innovate through it. And by that, I mean, truly having that understanding of your finances, your own strategy, your, technology, all that infrastructure, good team, all that stuff, right? I think the stronger you were going in, the stronger you'll be now and going out of it. And I think also, the ability to be agile and adapt and pivot and all these words we've been hearing.
Yeah.
It's really important. And for a nonprofit, what often happens is most of the funding they have is very restricted, meaning the donor or the government or whoever gave them the money dictated exactly what it can be used for and what it cannot be used for. And so if your money has to be used for in-person early childhood education, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then, what do you know?
And then you can't have that.
No one can show up. Then what are you supposed to do? To expect them to sit there and not spend the money? But the better way to go is to unrestrict all that money and make it for what's often called general operating support, which is, here's a grant, Mr. or Mrs. Nonprofit leader. We trust you to use the money how you best see fit. And that really allows the nonprofit leader to be flexible, not just in responding to negative, crises and situations, but also to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves. Like if there's new, legislation that would really kind of make a difference and they can support that, or, there's a new opportunity to provide services and they want to kind of create a new offering, whatever it might be, that flexible money is really helpful to any nonprofit leader that's trying to, navigate just, the regular old challenges and crises that we have, not to mention a global pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So you used the word trust there. Do you think there's a lack of trust when people are giving, that if they don't specify exactly how they want the money used, that it will be wasted?
That's exactly correct. Yes. I mean, there's a lack of trust. And I think a lot of it is really fear-based. And I think the scarcity mindset is based in fear. And in fact, I think that to such a degree that there's a whole chapter about fear as one of the manifestations of delusional altruism. And part of that fear is losing control. And it's this notion that, it's my money, as the donor. And if I give it away, then I, darn well want to make sure I know exactly how it's being spent. And, I think as business owners, we recognize like the downside of micromanagement, let's just say. Yes. And so isn't that just another manifestation of that? And again, I think it's important to trust the leaders of, these nonprofits. I mean, they're doing this not for the money. No. They're doing it because they really believe in what they, the cause or the issue. And if you're supporting somebody who's been working in this industry, in this field, who knows their community, who knows their organization, why not trust them to make the best choices and decisions, and to understand kind of what's needed. And, certainly you want to learn, like, how is the money spent and, what worked, what didn't work, all that is great. But I think it's important to build those trusting relationships with the nonprofits that you're supporting. Also because, when there is a problem, which there will be, in any nonprofit organization, if you're really, this is an organization you're supporting over time, then I think you really want that nonprofit leader to have confidence that they can come to you and have an open and honest conversation about, like, this isn't working, or I think I need to retire in the next 3 years and we have no succession plan. Like, we're going to need some help. Like, things aren't, whatever it is, it's not going well, or our board, half of our board is leaving, or whatever the problem might be, right? You really want your nonprofit leader to be able to trust you enough that they can come to you when there are problems with the confidence that you're going to, like, stick with them and, like, help them solve the problem, as opposed to fleeing, saying, well, good luck with that, I'm out, Yeah. And I've seen that happen a few times. I mean, one example in the US is the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And this is a very large national foundation, and they actually do a lot of support for nonprofit succession planning. And they had a nonprofit organization in the state of Maryland that was a huge provider of youth services. And, for a variety of reasons, they had lost a lot of funding, and there was an executive transition at the same time, and they needed help. But, this is a partner, they, an organization they really supported, had done really good work, but, a variety of bad things happened at the same time, not really the fault of the organization at all. Many funders would step back and say, well, get back to us once you hired somebody, once you've gotten through this, then we'll keep supporting you. And the Annie Casey Foundation stepped in and said, okay, we will help you now. We'll bring in, like, succession planning consultants and fund development consultants and help you and the board, kind of rectify and figure out what wasn't working, what you need to do differently, the kind of leader you need to bring in. Et cetera, et cetera. And it was exactly what they needed. And, then that organization was able to hire the right person and thrive. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah. And it's really, really interesting that, we can run a business and we can see that all that stuff is needed when running a business. Yet we somehow or other think that one can run a nonprofit without all the stuff that we deem really, really necessary when running a business: succession planning, strategy, all those things.
Absolutely.
And it's it's just incredible that we would then think that a nonprofit, which in some instances could be handling millions and millions of pounds, wouldn't need any of that stuff that a business, a commercial enterprise that is turning over millions and millions of pounds would need. Of course, when you think logically, of course they need the same things. Of course they come up with very, very similar issues in reality.
That's absolutely right. I often wonder, it seems like these super smart, a lot of philanthropists come into their wealth because of success as entrepreneurs. They've grown and then sold a business and now have, want to give back, which is great. But it's like all their smarts somehow like go out the door. They were super smart to be able to start the business and sell it profitably. And then it's like, it just evaporates, like research and development, who doesn't want to, some good R&D as a business owner or marketing or whatever it might be. And then it's like, oh, that doesn't matter. Or, sometimes there's a lot of hubris, because somebody was so successful in, hedge funds or in, whatever the widgets that they manufactured, then they therefore must have the solution to ending poverty, providing mental health, like stopping domestic violence, whatever it might be. And, we all can benefit from new ideas and fresh thinking, but it's also important as a donor to recognize that, yeah, you're really smart in a lot of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to solve problems that have been going on for, decades or centuries, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point in time, obviously, as we're recording, we are sitting in the middle of a global pandemic, which, we're all hoping will end at some point vaguely soon, but we actually have no idea at this point in time. There are, issues across the entire globe. What's the most important thing that philanthropists and we as entrepreneurs should be doing at this point in time during this crisis?
Yeah, I think it is to create to plan ahead, to continue planning ahead, even though the future is so uncertain. And I think, right now, so many people, to your point, are feeling like, my God, the future is uncertain. Conditions keep changing. The hits keep coming. It's like, I don't know if you have a game called Whack-A-Mole.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do.
It's like crisis Whack-A-Mole, like one crisis emerges and you whack it down and the next one pops up and you hit it,
Yeah.
And it can feel very challenging to plan when the future is so uncertain. But I think what's really important is for all of us to recognize that the future is always uncertain. The future is no more uncertain today than it was last year or last decade or last century.
Yes.
And instead of letting that thought of an unknown future paralyze us, I think we need to let it free us. And just recognize that, okay, it's always like this. There is no new normal coming around the corner. Like the vaccine is not going to make everything normal again, right? Yeah. Because there will always be crises. Disruption is the status quo.
Yeah,
it just is. And so, but to lean into that, allow that to free you, and to kind of quickly create a plan, whatever that is, if it's for your strategy, for your business, you're starting a foundation, or you're planning a wedding, whatever it is, create a plan that you can, quickly, based on the information you currently have available. Too often I think we need to go into this extensive data gathering exercises. And I think the reality is we need to move quickly based on what we know now. What are we trying to accomplish in the next, 12 months? Begin implementing that plan immediately. Where are we today? What are the top 2 or 3 or 4 things we need to do to get from where we are today to where we want to be in 6 months or a year? Yeah. And then begin doing it. Begin implementing it with the assumption that things are going to change, with the assumption you'll have to adjust your plan. And then literally block out time in your calendar over that period of time, every 2 weeks or every 2 months or whatever that would be, to literally check in on that plan and say what's working, what's not working, what else has changed that might force us to adjust this. Do we need to abandon something, add something, whatever? Yeah. Because that really gives you something to move on. It gives you something to work with and something that you can adjust. And it keeps you focused on what's most important. Because otherwise we end up kind of either sitting in the sidelines because we're petrified, yeah. Or we are just kind of busy doing lots of stuff, but it's not necessarily the right stuff. We're checking email or, whatever. And I think we really need to get clarity on what, where we're headed, what's the most important use of our time to get there, and then know that you can adjust that along the way. And that's fine, like not to worry about that. That's normal. And in fact, I just wrote an article about this that your listeners might be interested in. It's called 8 Things Every Philanthropist Can Do to Change the World, nice. Even when the world keeps changing.
Lovely. I love it. We will link to that in the show notes as well.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. And it's an easy download. You can go to 8things.org and download it for free. And it's written for philanthropists, but I think it's directly applicable to business leaders and, really anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And business leaders who want to become philanthropists as well at the same time, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Kris, this has been an incredibly fascinating conversation. I've certainly had my eyes open to, the fact that money is needed to run nonprofits. Imagine an accountant saying money is needed to run a nonprofit, but something that we just don't think about at all when we're giving. So I think that's been incredibly eye-opening for many, I am sure. Thank you so much for joining us. We will link to your book in the show notes. We'll link to that article in the show notes. Anywhere else that people can find you and connect with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, delusionalaltruism.com is the best place to find information about buying the book, which is available at Amazon UK.
Great.
And you can find me there as well.
Lovely. Excellent. Kris, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it. And it's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.